Now, in a classic example of how ruthless Hitler was, or a classic example, is the what's known as the Night of the Long Knives, which happened in the last days of June and first stage of July of 1934. Just as Hitler was consolidating power, von Hindenburg, the president of Germany, the hero of World War One, he was on his deathbed. Um, and so what happens is this. Ernst Röhm, and he is on the right here. He had been one of Hitler's closest allies as Hitler was climbing up the political ladder in the 1920s. And he was the head of the SA, which were basically the stormtroopers in Germany. Those were the thugs that would go out on the street and beat people up, go into Jewish stores and kind of mess with them. If you were Jewish, you would be in danger of being beaten up. But also, the stormtroopers would fight other political parties, the leftist, the communist. They were the well, I don't want to go down that road. They were just the arm of the Nazi Party as it was coming up as a political party, as a force to be reckoned with in Germany. Because remember, the Nazis don't control the army yet. And so what happens is that Hitler comes to power, becomes chancellor. Then the Reichstag fire, he starts taking away people's basic civil rights. Von Hindenburg basically steps aside, and then he's near his deathbed. But Hitler had a big problem. Here was Hitler's big problem. German conservatives were, were semi-okay with Hitler, and also his generals. They could live with Hitler, but they couldn't live with Ernst Röhm. They couldn't live with the stormtroopers, with the SA. And right now, we're not talking about the Gestapo. We're not talking about the SS or anything of that sort. These were just thugs that were on the street that had been part of Hitler's rise to power. So Hitler has a bit of a dilemma that the folks that helped bring him to power, the SA stormtroopers under Ernst Röhm, um, they helped bring him to power. But once he's in power, they are alienating Hitler from some of the most important elements of German society, especially the German army, the top leadership in the German army, who can't stand the SA, who distrust the stormtroopers, who see them as nothing but trouble, but also other conservative Germans as well, who see the SA as a rabble. And so Hitler has to decide what he is going to do with the SA, this instrument that helped bring him to power. The other thing is the SA grew exponentially as Hitler was taking power in Germany through parliamentary measures and then through emergency decrees. In August 1932, there were about 450,000 members of the SA. But by June of 1934, just a couple of years later, there were over 3,000. I don't know what is wrong with me today. Let me just start. But I'll restart. By August 1932, there were 450,000 members of the SA. By June of 1934, 2 years later, this number had grown to 3 million. So from 450,000 to 3 million stormtroopers roaming through Germany. They were often given free reign. They were outside of really any police control, and they were quite violent and quite difficult to control. And so Hitler comes to see Röhm, and in this way, Hitler and Stalin are somewhat analogous, right? Because, of course, in the Great Terror and the Great Purge, Stalin murders his enemies, although not that many folks who Stalin murdered were actually his enemies. It was just Stalin's paranoia. But Ernst Röhm actually did pose a threat to Hitler. and the stormtroopers. I mean, 3 million stormtroopers. And so Rom really did pose a threat to Hitler and Hitler's rule. And so Hermann Goering and Himmler, who is in the center of the picture, and he's going to become head of the SS, they start whispering in Hitler's ear that Ernst Röhm is going to lead a coup against Hitler. And so Hitler decides he needs to take action. And again, the other underlying aspect of this is that the conservative elements in German society that Hitler needed to have in his corner, especially top generals and the industrial elite, they hated the SA. They hated the stormtrooper tactics of the SA. So what happened is that Hitler decides that he has to move against Ernst Röhm. And this is all kind of in the context of also Hindenburg being near death. And so on June 30th, 1934, the members of the SA, including Röhm, were ordered to attend a meeting at a hotel in Bad Wies, Bavaria. And Hitler arrived personally, and he placed Röhm and other SA leaders under arrest. So what he did was he staged, he moved before Röhm could move. He shows up, he gets the elements of the Nazis that are very supportive of him, and he moves against Röhm before Röhm can move against him. And what happened is, over the next 2 days, the leadership of the SA were arrested and they were murdered without trial. And this is something, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to have you watch a documentary. Stalin was watching this from Russia, and he just thought this was amazing. Stalin was so impressed by the way that Hitler had handled his internal enemies, Röhm that had been a friend, but had really gotten out of control, and the SA, which the stormtroopers, who were potentially posing a real threat to Hitler's regime in Germany. So what Hitler does is he decapitates the leadership of the SA, including Röhm. Röhm is initially pardoned, but then he is executed. He's shot by his 2 guards. Hitler, he ultimately kills about 150 of the top leadership. He decapitates it. He kills and murders other opponents, including the former chancellor of Germany, a guy by the name of Kurt von Schliedler, which you don't have to remember, and I apologize for my German. The point is that Hitler, in the Night of the Long Knives, he goes after his friends who had become just too much trouble and potentially a threat to Hitler's rule. Even Hitler couldn't control them. So what he decides to do is he decides he needs to kill them. He needs to take the leadership of the SA along with some of his political opponents, and he needs to arrest and he needs to kill them. So this is what he does. Now, in combination with Hindenburg's death a few months later, this is a very, very significant moment in the consolidation of Hitler's power in Germany, because now the German generals, they're willing to work with Hitler. They weren't willing to work with the SA. They weren't willing to work with Ernst Röhm, but they're willing to work with Hitler, and they admire how Hitler handled it. They had admired how Hitler had gotten Röhm out of the way. So Hitler now can work with the top generals of the German army. And the other part of this is the conservative elements of German society, especially the top capitalists in industry, in agriculture, they also believe that they can make an accommodation with Hitler as well. Hitler looks moderate compared to Röhm, and they're pleased that Hitler has taken Röhm out. And so the conservative elements in Germany that Hitler needed in order to rule Germany After the Night of the Long Knives, they move into Hitler's corner. And then, of course, what happens is after 1934, Hitler gains more and more power until there's really no real opposition to him within Germany. So this is a very, very key moment in the history of Hitler's rule. And it was also very popular among the middle classes in German, the basic folks in Germany who saw it as a blow in favor of law and order. And most Germans basically embrace Hitler at this point. They see him as a bulwark against communism, against leftism, but Hitler at the same time had also stamped out the rowdier elements of the Nazi Party, the stormtrooper elements of the Nazi Party. He had executed the leadership. And the SA, the stormtroopers, who had been such a major role in the rise of Hitler, their numbers drop almost 50% by 1935 as Hitler gets complete control over them. Some he sidelines, some he moves into the army, some he moves into the SS. So the Night of the Long Knives, very, very significant moment in the consolidation of Hitler's power that happened in June and early July of 1935. Hold on. Actually, it's 1934. Another mistake in this podcast. Sorry about that.